The Zephyrian battlecruiser, Stellar Dominance, hung motionless in the void, its crystalline hull reflecting the distant stars like a prism of death. Commander Veltar adjusted the neural interface, linking him to the ship's consciousness, feeling the familiar tingle as battle data flowed directly into his mind. The engagement had lasted exactly 14 minutes and 37 seconds, a respectable duration for what the Galactic Council classified as a minor territorial dispute. Veltar's elongated fingers danced across the holographic displays surrounding his command throne. The readings were clear. The human vessel had ceased all weapons fire, its energy signatures dropping to minimal levels. Standard operating procedure dictated that any species would now transmit surrender codes, or at minimum, attempt to negotiate terms of defeat. The Zephyrians have been waging interstellar warfare for over 3 millennia, and this pattern held true across 47 different species they had encountered. Tactical Officer Corwin. Veltar's voice carried the harmonic undertones that indicated formal military protocol, confirmed the cessation of hostilities from the human vessel. Corwin's 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he processed the sensor data streaming through his consciousness. The young officer had joined the crew only 2 cycles ago, fresh from the military academy on Zephyria Prime. His enthusiasm for proper protocol still amused the veteran crew members. Confirmed, Commander. The human ship designated UES Marathon shows no active weapon signatures. Their primary reactor has dropped to standby levels, and their defensive screens have collapsed. By all standard metrics, they have surrendered. Veltar nodded, his head crest fluttering with satisfaction. The humans had proven more resilient than expected, but ultimately, they followed the same patterns as every other species. Fear of death overrode courage when faced with overwhelming odds. It was a universal constant that the Zephyrian Empire had exploited to expand across 12 star systems. The Marathon drifted before them, a crude metal construct barely 300 meters in length. Compared to the kilometer-long Zephyrian vessel, it appeared almost primitive. The humans had only achieved faster-than-light travel 53 of their years ago, making them relative newcomers to the galactic community. Their technology relied on chemical reactions and nuclear fusion, barbaric compared to the elegant quantum manipulation systems the Zephyrians had mastered. Communications Officer Zilna Veltar continued. Open a channel to the human vessel. We shall accept their surrender and proceed with standard occupation protocols. Zilnara's tentacles writhed as she manipulated the communication array. The universal translator would handle the linguistic conversion, though she doubted the humans possessed the intellectual capacity for sophisticated discourse. Most primitive species could barely form coherent thoughts under the stress of defeat. The main display flickered to life, revealing the interior of the human bridge. Veltar had studied the visual records of humans during his preparation for this mission, but seeing them in real time still struck him as oddly fascinating. They were bipedal mammals, covered in pale flesh except for the peculiar fiber growths on their heads. Their eyes held only 2 pupils each, severely limiting their visual range, and they possessed merely 4 limbs. How such a crude design had achieved space travel remained a mystery. The human who appeared on screen wore what they called a uniform, a simple fabric covering in blue and gold colors. According to the intelligence briefings, the rank insignia on his collar identified him as a captain, equivalent to a ship commander. He was older than the typical human military age, with silver threads in the fiber covering his head and lines etched around his eyes. I am Commander Veltar of the Zephyrian Imperial Navy. Veltar began, his words automatically translated into the crude human language. Your vessel is disabled, and your resistance has ended. Prepare to receive our boarding party for formal surrender proceedings. The human captain stared directly into the communication pickup, his 2 eyes focusing with an intensity that seemed almost predatory. When he spoke, his voice carried a tone that Veltar couldn't quite interpret through the translator's emotional filters. Commander Veltar, I'm Captain James Mitchell of the United Earth Ship Marathon. I want to make something very clear to you. The human paused, and Veltar noticed something odd about his facial expression. The corners of his mouth had turned upward slightly. Among humans, this was called a smile, though intelligence reports suggested it could indicate multiple emotional states. We haven't surrendered, Captain Mitchell continued. We've just been warming up. The communication channel closed abruptly, leaving the Zephyrian bridge in confused silence. Veltar's head crest flattened against his skull, an involuntary response to unexpected information that contradicted established patterns. Corwin, Veltar said slowly, run another sensor sweep of the human vessel. Full spectrum analysis. The tactical officer's claws clicked against his control surface as he initiated the scan. Commander, I'm reading. This is highly irregular. The human ship's power signatures are climbing rapidly. Their reactor output has increased by 300% in the last 30 seconds. Impossible, Veltar muttered. Their primary systems were disabled. We witnessed the cascade failure of their weapons grid. Sir, Zillar interrupted, her tentacles coiled with anxiety. I'm detecting massive electromagnetic activity from the Marathon. It's not matching any known power redistribution pattern. On the display, the human ship began to change. What had appeared to be dead sections of hull suddenly blazed with energy. Weapon ports that had been dark for the last 8 minutes now glowed with ominous light. The vessel's orientation shifted, bringing weapons to bear that hadn't been active during the entire engagement. Veltar felt a sensation he hadn't experienced since his first space battle decades ago: genuine uncertainty. The Zephyrian Empire had conquered species across the galaxy by following predictable patterns of warfare. Superior technology, overwhelming force, and the universal fear of death had proven effective against every civilization they encountered. Yet something was happening aboard the human ship that didn't fit any pattern in their extensive military database. Commander, Corwin's voice carried a note of disbelief. The Marathon is powering weapons systems that weren't even active during our initial engagement. These energy signatures, they're not in our intelligence reports about human military capabilities. Through the tactical display, Veltar watched as the human ship transformed from a defeated wreck into something far more threatening. Emergency lights that had indicated critical damage now revealed themselves to be deliberate deceptions. Sections of hull that had appeared breached were sliding away to reveal previously hidden weapon emplacements. Analysis, tactical officer. How is this possible? Corwin's 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession as he processed incoming data. Commander, it appears the humans deliberately shut down their primary systems to simulate critical damage. But the power grid routing, it's incredibly complex. They've been running essential systems on minimal power while rerouting everything to charge weapons that we didn't even know existed. The implications of this revelation struck Veltar like a physical blow. The humans hadn't been defeated. They had been planning. While the Zephyrian Empire relied on overwhelming force and technological superiority, the humans had employed deception on a scale that seemed almost impossible to maintain under combat stress. They were pretending to be defeated? Veltar asked, though he could barely process the concept. It appears so, Commander. But the level of coordination required their entire crew would have had to maintain this deception while taking actual damage from our weapons. The psychological stress alone should have caused their command structure to collapse. Through the view screen, Captain Mitchell's image appeared again, though now the human's expression had changed completely. Where before there had been the calm demeanor of someone acknowledging defeat, now there was something that made Veltar's chitinous skin crawl. The human's eyes held an intensity that seemed to burn through the display, and, when he smiled, it revealed white teeth that somehow appeared predatory despite belonging to an omnivorous species. Commander Veltar, Captain Mitchell said, his voice carrying a quality that the universal translator struggled to render in Zephyrian harmonic speech. Let me introduce you to something we humans call a sucker punch. The Marathon erupted in coordinated weapons fire unlike anything the Zephyrians had witnessed. These weren't the standard energy weapons they had been exchanging during the initial engagement. Streams of superheated plasma, magnetic accelerator rounds moving at significant fractions of light speed, and energy beams that seemed to bend space itself around their passage struck the stellar dominance with devastating precision. Veltar felt the deck plating vibrate beneath his feet as the ship's defensive systems struggled to compensate. Warning signals flooded the bridge as damage reports cascaded through the command network. In 30 seconds, the humans had inflicted more damage to his vessel than they had managed during the entire previous engagement. Shields down to 68%, Corwin reported, his voice tight with stress. Commander, these weapons, they're operating on principles our defensive systems weren't designed to counter. The humans appear to have been analyzing our shield frequencies during the initial engagement, and modified their weapons accordingly. The tactical display showed the devastating effectiveness of the human surprise attack. The Marathon moved with sudden grace, no longer the sluggish, damaged vessel it had appeared to be moments before. Its engines blazed with power that hadn't been evident during the previous battle, and its weapon systems fired with a coordination that spoke of extensive preparation. Veltar realized with growing horror that everything they believed about human capabilities had been deliberately fed to them. The intelligence reports, the tactical assessments, even the apparent limitations of human technology, all of it had been a carefully constructed deception designed to lure Zephyrian forces into exactly this situation. How many ships like the Marathon does Earth possess? Veltar asked, though he feared he already knew the answer. Zilnara's tentacles writhed as she accessed the communication logs from their initial contact with human space. Commander, according to their transmissions, the Marathon is designated as a training vessel for their naval academy. It was supposed to be crewed primarily by students and instructors on a routine patrol mission. The bridge fell silent except for the continuing damage reports from the human weapons fire. If this was what humans considered a training mission, what were their actual military vessels capable of achieving? Captain Mitchell's voice echoed through the bridge as he opened another communication channel. Commander Veltar, I want you to understand something about humans. We have a saying, it's not how hard you hit, it's how hard you can get hit, and keep moving forward. You've just learned what happens when you assume we're down for the count. The human paused, and when he continued, his voice carried a tone that seemed to resonate with something primal and terrifying. Now let me show you what human adrenaline can accomplish when we stop playing defense and start playing to win. Veltar watched in growing alarm as additional human vessels began dropping out of faster-than-light travel around his position. These weren't training ships. They were sleek, predatory craft that moved with lethal purpose. The entire engagement had been a trap, and the Zephyrian Empire had walked directly into it. As plasma fire from a dozen human ships began raking his vessel's hull, Veltar realized that every assumption his species had made about humans and warfare was catastrophically wrong. The battle hadn't ended when the humans appeared to surrender. It had only just begun. Dr. Kethera had spent the last 15 cycles studying xenobiology, cataloging the physiological responses of various species to combat stress. Her research had contributed to the Zephyrian Empire's understanding of how different alien races collapsed under pressure, making conquest more efficient. Never in her extensive career had she encountered readings like the ones streaming from the biosensors monitoring the human vessel. The laboratory aboard the Stellar Dominance hummed with activity as automated systems processed the flood of biological data being collected from the ongoing battle. Kethera's 6 limbs moved in practice coordination, manipulating holographic displays, while her primary consciousness interfaced directly with the ship's analytical systems. The data flowing through her neural pathways defied everything she understood about mammalian physiology. Computer, display comparative stress hormone analysis between human and Zephyrian crew members during combat. She commanded, her scientific curiosity overriding the chaos erupting around her. The holographic display materialized, showing 2 distinct biological profiles. The Zephyrian readings followed expected patterns: elevated stress markers, increased neural activity in fear processing centers, and the gradual degradation of cognitive function that occurred when any sentient being faced mortal danger. These were universal responses she had documented across dozens of species. The human readings were something else entirely. Computer, verify accuracy of human biological data. These readings appear to contain multiple errors. Biological data verified through 3 independent sensor arrays. Accuracy confirmed at 99.97% reliability. Kethera felt her research tentacles curl in disbelief. According to the sensors, the humans weren't experiencing the biological collapse that should accompany prolonged combat stress. Instead, their cardiovascular systems had accelerated far beyond normal parameters while maintaining perfect coordination. Their neural activity showed patterns that suggested enhanced cognitive function rather than the degradation she expected. Most disturbing of all was a chemical compound flooding the human's circulatory systems in quantities that should have induced organ failure or death. The molecular structure was relatively simple, a hormone that appeared to be naturally produced by their bodies in response to perceived threats. But The concentrations being detected were unlike anything in her xenobiological database. Computer analyzed the unknown hormone detected in human subjects. Cross-reference with known biochemical warfare agents. Analysis complete. The compound identified as adrenaline, also known as epinephrine, not classified as a warfare agent. Substance appears to be a naturally occurring hormone produced by human adrenal glands during stress responses. Kethera's primary eye stalks swiveled to focus entirely on the display, a naturally occurring hormone that improved performance under stress. Such a biological adaptation contradicted fundamental principles of evolutionary biology. Stress responses were designed to preserve individual organisms by encouraging escape from dangerous situations, not to enhance their ability to continue fighting. She accessed the tactical feeds to observe the human crew directly. Through the security monitors she had tapped during the initial boarding scan, she could see inside the Marathon's command center. What she observed challenged her understanding of how sapient beings responded to mortal danger. The human bridge crew moved with fluid efficiency, their actions perfectly coordinated despite the massive forces being generated by their ship's evasive maneuvers. Where Zephyrian crews would be experiencing decision paralysis and cognitive deterioration, the humans appeared to be functioning at peak capacity. Their communication was crisp and precise, with no signs of the communication breakdown that typically occurred when stress hormones overwhelmed neural pathways. Captain Mitchell stood at the center of the bridge, issuing orders with calm authority while his ship engaged multiple Zephyrian vessels simultaneously. But it wasn't calm that Kethera observed. It was something far more unsettling. The human's movements were faster than they had been during initial contact. His reaction times dramatically improved. His cardiovascular system was operating at levels that should have induced cardiac arrest, yet he appeared to be functioning better than during normal operations. Computer displayed detailed biological analysis of the human designated Captain Mitchell. The readout that appeared made Kethera question whether her equipment was malfunctioning. Mitchell's heart rate had increased to nearly 3 times its baseline level, pumping the adrenaline compound through his system at tremendous velocity. His breathing had shifted to a pattern that optimized oxygen intake, while his muscle tension increased to enhance physical performance. Most remarkably, his neural activity showed enhanced pattern recognition and accelerated decision-making capabilities. "This is impossible," she whispered, though she knew her instruments were functioning perfectly. She activated a direct communication link to the bridge, overriding standard military protocols. "Commander Veltar, Dr. Ketara requesting immediate consultation." "Doctor, unless your laboratory is under direct attack. I don't have time for—" "Commander, the humans aren't following any known biological patterns for combat stress. They're actually improving under pressure. Whatever is happening to them physiologically is enhancing their capabilities rather than degrading them." A moment of silence followed before Veltar responded, his voice carrying the harmonic undertones of extreme stress. "Explain." "Sir, human beings appear to possess a naturally evolved chemical enhancement system that activates during combat situations. They're essentially biochemical weapons that improve with exposure to danger." Through the tactical feeds, Kethera watched the human crew as they coordinated a devastating attack run against 3 Zephyrian cruisers. Their movements were precise and economical, displaying none of the wasteful energy expenditure she observed in other species under stress. Instead of the typical degradation of fine motor control, the humans demonstrated enhanced dexterity and reaction speed. She focused her analysis on a human technician working at one of the weapons control stations. The individual, their database indicated the rank designation was Petty Officer, was simultaneously managing targeting solutions for 6 different weapon systems while coordinating with the tactical officer for optimal firing sequences. The level of multitasking being displayed should have been impossible for a brain operating under stress-induced chemical influences. Computer analyzed the neural pathway utilization in human subject designated Petty Officer Chun. The display that materialized showed brain activity patterns that violated several principles of neurobiology. Instead of the narrow focus typical of stressed organisms, Chin's neural pathways showed enhanced connectivity between different brain regions. The chemical cocktail in his bloodstream wasn't impairing his cognitive function. It was optimizing it for combat operations. Kethera expanded her analysis to include the entire human crew. What she discovered was a species that had evolved to become more dangerous the longer a conflict continued. Where other species experience fatigue, resource depletion, and eventual collapse, humans appeared to reach higher levels of performance as their adrenaline systems reached full activation. Commander, I'm reading impossible biological metrics from the human crew. Their cardiovascular efficiency has improved by 37% since combat began. Their reaction times have decreased by an average of 43%. Most significantly, their decision-making speed has improved while maintaining accuracy levels above baseline performance. She paused as new data flowed through her analysis systems. Sir, I don't believe these humans are the same species we were briefed about. The intelligence reports suggested a fairly typical mammalian species with standard stress responses. What I'm observing is a race that has evolved specifically for prolonged combat operations. Through the laboratory's observation ports, she could see the ongoing battle between the human squadron and the Zephyrian fleet. The humans' tactical approach was unlike anything in their military databases. Instead of seeking quick resolution through overwhelming force, they appear to be deliberately extending the engagement, allowing their biological enhancement systems to reach maximum effectiveness. The Marathon executed a maneuver that should have been impossible for a vessel of its design, a spiraling attack pattern that brought it within optimal firing range of two Zephyrian destroyers while avoiding the overlapping defensive fire from their escorts. The coordination required between pilot, navigator, and weapons systems was beyond what any known species could achieve under combat stress. Computer, calculate the probability that the observed human performance levels could be achieved through technological enhancement rather than biological adaptation. Analysis complete. Probability of technological enhancement, 12.3%. Observed performance patterns consistent with evolved biological adaptation. Conclusion. Human combat effectiveness appears to be a naturally selected evolutionary trait. Kethera felt a chill that had nothing to do with the laboratory's environmental controls. The implications of her analysis were terrifying. The Zephyrian Empire had built its expansion on the assumption that all species followed predictable patterns when faced with superior force. Fear, stress, and the preservation instinct had proven universal constants that could be exploited to achieve quick victories. Humans represented something that challenged the fundamental basis of Zephyrian military doctrine. They were a species that had evolved to become more effective combatants when subjected to stress, fear, and the threat of death. Every tactic in the Zephyrian arsenal was designed to induce exactly the conditions that made humans more dangerous. She accessed historical databases, searching for any reference to similar adaptations in other species. The evolutionary record showed countless examples of predator-prey relationships that had driven adaptive responses, but nothing approached what she was observing in humans. Most species developed better defensive mechanisms, improved camouflage, or enhanced escape capabilities. Humans had evolved to fight more effectively. Computer, project combat effectiveness curves for humans versus Zephyrians based on current biological data. The resulting graph was more disturbing than anything she had discovered in 15 cycles of xenobiological research. While Zephyrian combat effectiveness followed a predictable decline curve as stress and fatigue accumulated, human effectiveness showed a sharp increase that plateaued at levels far above their baseline capabilities. The longer a battle continued, the greater the advantage would shift toward the humans. Her analysis was interrupted by a proximity alarm from the tactical systems. 3 more human vessels had appeared at the edge of sensor range, moving with the same predatory efficiency she had observed from the Marathon. But these weren't training ships. Their energy signatures indicated military vessels designed specifically for combat operations. Computer, extrapolate human fleet capabilities based on observed performance enhancements from adrenaline activation. The projection that appeared made her research tentacles curl in instinctive fear. If the training vessel Marathon could achieve this level of performance, dedicated warships crewed by humans operating at peak adrenaline enhancement would be unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They would be vessels crewed by beings who became more dangerous the more desperate the situation became. Through the communication systems, she could hear Captain Mitchell addressing the Zephyrian fleet. His voice carried the same calm authority she had noted earlier, but now she understood that the calm was misleading. The human wasn't relaxed. He was operating in a state of controlled biochemical enhancement that allowed perfect clarity while maintaining access to drastically improved physical and mental capabilities. Zephyrian vessels, this is Captain Mitchell. You've made a fundamental error in your assessment of human capabilities. You assumed that putting us under pressure would break us. Instead, you've given us exactly what we need to show you what we're really capable of. Kethera realized with growing horror that the entire engagement had been a deliberate provocation. The humans hadn't stumbled into combat with a superior force. They had orchestrated it. They had used themselves as bait to trigger their own biochemical enhancement systems and demonstrate capabilities that no intelligence-gathering operation could have predicted. As she watched the human squadron begin a coordinated assault that utilized tactics beyond anything in the Zephyrian military database, Dr. Kethera understood that her species had encountered something unprecedented in their thousands of years of conquest. They had found a species that was designed by evolution itself to win wars. Tactical Officer Corwin had been trained to process battlefield information with mechanical precision, but the data flowing through his neural interfaces was challenging every algorithm in his military programming. The human fleet movements weren't following any recognizable pattern from the Zephyrian combat database. Instead of the expected retreat or defensive positioning after initial contact, the human vessels were executing what could only be described as an escalating assault pattern. Commander, the human fleet has increased to 12 vessels, Corwin reported, his 4 eyes tracking multiple display screens simultaneously. But their tactical approach, it's unlike anything in our strategic archives. The holographic battle display showed the expanding engagement zone with clinical precision. What had begun as a simple patrol encounter with a single human training vessel had evolved into something that defied conventional military logic. Each new human ship that arrived didn't seek to establish defensive positions or coordinate with existing forces in standard formation patterns. Instead, they moved with predatory independence while maintaining perfect tactical coordination. Commander Veltar studied the display, his head crest flattening as he processed the implications. Analysis, Corwin. Are they attempting to surround our position? Negative, sir. They're not seeking positional advantage in any conventional sense. Computer analysis suggests they're deliberately exposing themselves to concentrated fire from our vessels while maximizing their own combat exposure time. The statement hung in the bridge air like a discordant harmonic. Corwin's training had covered every known tactical doctrine employed by 47 different species across the galaxy. Deliberate exposure to enemy fire was universally recognized as a pathway to defeat. Yet the humans appear to be actively seeking prolonged combat engagement. Through his neural link, Corwin accessed real-time performance data from the human vessels. The information streaming from their sensor arrays painted a picture that challenged fundamental assumptions about combat psychology. Instead of the expected degradation in performance as battle stress accumulated, the human crews were demonstrating measurable improvements in coordination, reaction times, and tactical decision-making. Commander, I'm detecting synchronized behavioral patterns across the entire human fleet. Their response times to our tactical movements are decreasing with each engagement cycle. They appear to be learning and adapting at rates that exceed our counter-adaptation capabilities. Veltar's elongated fingers gripped the armrests of his command throne. Show me detailed analysis of their learning curve. The tactical display shifted to show a three-dimensional representation of combat exchanges over time. Zephyrian forces typically dominated early engagement phases through superior technology and overwhelming firepower, with enemy effectiveness declining as stress and casualties accumulated. The graph showing human performance followed an entirely different trajectory. Sir, human effectiveness shows consistent improvement throughout the engagement period. Their initial response time to our tactical maneuvers was 3.7 seconds. Current response time has decreased to 1.2 seconds. More significantly, their counter-maneuver selection accuracy has improved from 68% to 94%. The implications struck Corwin like physical impacts. The humans weren't just maintaining their combat effectiveness under pressure. They were using the pressure to enhance their capabilities. Every exchange with Zephyrian forces was teaching them to fight more effectively against Zephyrian tactics. Computer, project human combat effectiveness if current improvement rates continue for the next standard time cycle. The resulting calculation made Corwin's auxiliary eyes blink in rapid succession. If the human learning curve maintained its current trajectory, they would achieve near-perfect tactical responses within minutes. They were essentially using real combat to transform themselves from competent opponents into nearly unbeatable ones. Through the tactical feeds, he observed individual human crew members aboard the Marathon. Dr. Kithera's biological analysis had identified the chemical enhancement system responsible for their improved performance, but Corwin was witnessing the practical application of those biochemical changes. Human gunners were achieving targeting solutions faster than the ship's computers could calculate optimal firing patterns. Navigation officers were plotting course corrections that anticipated Zephyrian movements with uncanny accuracy. Commander, request permission to access the human communication channels. I want to understand their coordination protocols. Granted, but maintain passive monitoring only. Do not reveal our intelligence gathering capabilities. Corwin's consciousness interfaced with the communication array, filtering the human transmissions through the universal translator. What he discovered added another layer to the growing mystery of human combat psychology. The voices streaming through the communication network carried none of the stress markers he expected from beings engaged in mortal combat. Instead, the humans sounded almost excited. Marathon, this is Lexington. We've got 3 more Zephyrian cruisers dropping out of FTL at bearing 047. Looks like they're bringing friends to the party. Copy that, Lex. Yorktown, can you swing around and give them a proper welcome? We'll keep the main group busy. Roger, Marathon. Moving to intercept. This is what we trained for, people. The casual confidence in their communications was disturbing enough, but Corwin detected something else in their vocal patterns. Genuine enthusiasm. The humans weren't enduring combat stress. They were embracing it. The threatening situation that should have induced fear responses was generating what could only be described as excitement. Computer, analyze emotional stress markers in human communications. Analysis complete. Human communications showed decreased stress indicators compared to baseline levels recorded during initial contact. Detected emotional markers suggest elevated enthusiasm, confidence, and anticipation. Corwin felt his neural pathways struggling to process this information. The humans were becoming emotionally more stable as the battle intensified. Their stress levels were dropping while their performance improved, and their tactical situation became more dangerous. Everything about their behavior contradicted fundamental principles of combat psychology. He expanded his analysis to include the broader human fleet movements. 12 vessels were now engaged in coordinated operations across a 3-dimensional combat zone spanning several million cubic kilometers. The level of tactical coordination being demonstrated required communication and processing capabilities that shouldn't be possible for organic crews operating under combat conditions. Commander, the human fleet is executing what appears to be a planned tactical sequence. But the complexity of their coordination suggests they're operating with enhanced cognitive function rather than degraded performance under stress. Show me their formation patterns. The holographic display revealed something that made Corwin question his understanding of space combat doctrine. The human fleet wasn't maintaining any recognizable formation. Instead, they were flowing through space in patterns that maximized their individual combat effectiveness while creating overlapping fields of fire that trapped Zephyrian vessels in multiple crossfire situations. More disturbing was the realization that their tactical pattern was adaptive. Each time Zephyrian forces attempted to break out of the engagement zone, the human fleet configuration shifted to counter the movement. They weren't following a predetermined plan. They were improvising complex tactical solutions in real time while maintaining perfect coordination across 12 separate vessels. Computer, calculate the processing power required for the observed level of human tactical coordination. Calculation complete. Required processing power exceeds typical biological neural capacity by factor of 412%. Observed coordination patterns suggest enhanced cognitive function or technological augmentation. Corwin accessed Dr. Kithera's biological analysis again, searching for an explanation. The adrenaline enhancement system she had identified could account for improved reaction times and physical performance, but the level of cognitive enhancement he was observing seemed to exceed what simple biochemical changes could achieve. Then he noticed something in the neurological data that the doctor had highlighted but not fully analyzed. Human brain activity during adrenaline activation showed increased connectivity between different neural regions. The chemical enhancement wasn't just improving individual brain functions. It was creating new pathways for information processing. Commander, I believe the human enhancement system creates temporary neural reorganization during combat situations. They're literally becoming more intelligent under combat stress. The statement seemed to hang in the bridge atmosphere like a dangerous energy discharge. Veltar's head crest flattened completely against his skull, a response Corwin had never seen from the veteran commander. That's impossible, tactical officer. Neural enhancement of that magnitude would require technological intervention beyond anything in our databases. Sir, the biological data is conclusive. Human neural activity patterns during adrenaline activation create cognitive capabilities that exceed their baseline function by significant margins. They're not using technology, they evolved this way. Through the tactical display, Corwin watched as the human fleet began implementing a maneuver that no computer simulation had ever predicted as viable. 3 human vessels were deliberately positioning themselves within the overlapping firing arcs of 6 Zephyrian destroyers, while the remaining 9 human ships executed precision strikes against specific systems on each Zephyrian vessel. The coordination required was beyond what any known species could achieve. Each human ship was simultaneously tracking multiple enemy vessels, coordinating with allied units, and executing complex maneuvers that required split-second timing. The cognitive load should have overwhelmed any biological nervous system. Instead, they were executing it flawlessly. Computer, project the outcome if human cognitive enhancement capabilities continue to improve at current rates. The resulting analysis made Corwin's training protocols activate emergency stress responses. If human intelligence continued to increase throughout prolonged combat, they would eventually reach cognitive levels that exceeded Zephyrian capabilities. They would become, temporarily, a more advanced species than their opponents. Commander, we need to consider the possibility that prolonged engagement with human forces will result in them achieving cognitive superiority over our tactical systems. They appear to be using combat itself as a form of evolutionary enhancement. The tactical display updated to show the arrival of additional human vessels. But these weren't the sleek warships that had been joining the engagement. These were massive constructions that dwarfed even the largest Zephyrian battleships. Their energy signatures suggested capabilities that exceeded anything in the galactic military database. Sir, Corwin said, his voice carrying harmonics of genuine fear. I don't think this was a patrol encounter. I think we've stumbled into a human military exercise designed to test their combat enhancement capabilities against a real enemy. As he watched the massive human vessels begin deploying smaller craft in coordinated swarms, Corwin realized the terrifying truth. The Zephyrian Empire hadn't encountered a species they could conquer. They had found a species that used warfare itself to evolve in real time into whatever was necessary to achieve victory. Chief Engineer Nexville had maintained a stellar dominance through 43 major engagements across 8 different star systems, but the damage reports flooding his consciousness defied every principle of starship engineering he had mastered. The human weapons weren't just causing destruction, they were somehow learning the ship's defensive patterns and adapting their attack methods in real time. His workshop deep in the ship's core hummed with emergency repair systems working at maximum capacity. But for each system they restored, the humans found new ways to exploit previously unknown vulnerabilities. The engineering displays surrounding his workstation painted a picture of systematic dismantlement that seemed almost surgical in its precision. Computer, analyze the pattern of incoming weapons fire over the last 10 standard time units. Nexville commanded, his 6 manipulator arms coordinating repairs while his primary consciousness processed damage reports. The holographic display that materialized showed something that challenged his understanding of how weapons systems operated. The human weapons fire wasn't random or even following standard target prioritization algorithms. Instead, it showed clear evidence of learning behavior that adapted to each defensive countermeasure the Zephyrian ship employed. Analysis complete. Human weapons fire demonstrates progressive adaptation to defensive systems. Initial attack patterns showed 62% effectiveness against primary shields. Current effectiveness has improved to 91% through systematic exploitation of identified weaknesses. Nexville felt his secondary nervous system spike with alarm responses. Weapons systems didn't learn. They were programmed with specific targeting parameters and fired according to predetermined algorithms. What the humans were demonstrating suggested either artificial intelligence capabilities far beyond anything in the galactic database or something even more disturbing. He accessed the technical specifications for human technology that had been compiled during their initial contact protocols. According to intelligence reports, human weapons relied on relatively primitive targeting systems using basic computational assistance. Their ships were powered by nuclear fusion reactors and employed straightforward energy weapons that should have been easily countered by Zephyrian defensive technology. Yet the weapons fire now, striking his ship operated with precision that exceeded the capabilities described in any intelligence briefing. Computer, compare current human weapons performance with initial intelligence assessments of their technological capabilities. Comparison complete. Current performance exceeds initial assessments by 347% in targeting accuracy, 412% in adaptive countermeasure penetration, and 733% in coordinated fire control. The numbers made no sense from an engineering perspective. Technological systems didn't spontaneously improve their performance by several 100% during operation. Either the intelligence reports had been catastrophically inaccurate, or something fundamental about human technology was beyond Zephyrian understanding. Nextville activated a direct link to the sensor arrays monitoring the human vessels. Through the ship's external scanners, he could observe the Marathon and its accompanying fleet as they executed maneuvers that seemed to violate basic principles of physics and engineering. Human ships were achieving acceleration profiles that should have liquefied any biological crew. Yet sensor readings indicated the humans were not only surviving these forces, but functioning at peak efficiency. Computer, analyze human vessel performance parameters. Compare with known biological tolerance limits for humanoid species. The resulting data made Nextville question whether his instruments were functioning correctly. Human ships were generating G-forces that exceeded the survival threshold for most known species by factors of 10 or more. Yet, biological scanners showed the human crews not only conscious, but operating at enhanced performance levels. He expanded his analysis to focus on the engineering systems of the human vessels. What he discovered challenged everything he understood about the relationship between biological crews and technological systems. Human ships weren't just machines operated by organic beings. They appeared to be hybrid systems where the biological and technological components enhanced each other in ways that exceeded the sum of their individual capabilities. Through the sensor feeds, he could observe human engineering crews working in their reactor chambers and weapons control centers, where Zephyrian engineering required careful coordination between multiple specialists operating from protected control positions. Human engineers were working directly with their technology in ways that seemed almost symbiotic. A human technician he observed through the sensor array was simultaneously monitoring 6 different power distribution systems while manually adjusting plasma flow regulators and coordinating with weapons teams for optimal energy allocation. The level of multitasking being demonstrated required cognitive capabilities that exceeded the reported intelligence levels for the human species. Computer analyzed the integration level between human crews and their technological systems. Analysis indicates unprecedented integration between biological operators and technological systems. Human crews demonstrate real-time adaptation to system modifications and performance optimization that exceeds standard operational parameters. Nextville realized he was witnessing something that challenged fundamental assumptions about the relationship between intelligence and technology. Most species, including the Zephyrians, operated their technology as external tools. The beings controlled the machines through interface systems that translated biological decisions into technological actions. Humans appear to be merging with their technology during combat operations. The distinction between human decision-making and computer processing seemed to be blurring as their adrenaline enhancement system activated. They weren't just operating their ships more effectively. They were becoming integrated components of their technological systems. He accessed the technical specifications for human neural interface technology, expecting to find advanced cybernetic augmentation systems that could explain the observed integration levels. Instead, he found that humans used relatively primitive interface systems that relied primarily on manual controls and vocal communication. "This is impossible," he muttered, though the sensor data was unambiguous. The impossibility became even more pronounced as he observed human damage control operations. A human engineering team was responding to critical system failures with coordination that exceeded what automated repair systems could achieve. They were anticipating failures before diagnostic systems detected them and implementing repairs using improvised solutions that exceeded the original design specifications. Computer analyze human engineering response times compared to automated system diagnostics. Analysis indicates human engineering teams are identifying and responding to system failures an average of 2.3 seconds before automated diagnostic systems detect the same problems. Human repair solutions demonstrate innovation levels that exceed standard engineering protocols. The implication struck Nextville like an energy discharge. Human engineers weren't just maintaining their technology, they were improving it during combat operations. The adrenaline enhancement system that Dr. Kethera had identified was somehow enabling humans to transcend the normal limitations of biological cognition and achieve integration with their technology that bordered on supernatural. Through the damage control feeds, he watched as human repair teams implemented modifications to their ship systems that hadn't existed in the original design specifications. They were essentially redesigning their technology in real time to counter Zephyrian weapons more effectively. Computer project human technological capabilities if current improvement rates continue throughout prolonged combat. The calculation that resulted made his primary consciousness recoil with programming conflicts. If humans could continue improving their technology during combat operations, they would eventually achieve capabilities that exceeded anything in the galactic technological database. They were using warfare itself as a form of technological evolution. His analysis was interrupted by an emergency alert from the ship's primary reactor. The human weapons fire had somehow identified and targeted a critical control junction that wasn't supposed to be detectable from external sensors. The precision required suggested intimate knowledge of Zephyrian engineering principles that humans shouldn't possess. Computer analyze how human weapons identified the reactor control vulnerability. Analysis indicates human weapons systems demonstrate real-time analysis of target construction and identification of optimal strike points based on observable response patterns to previous weapon impacts. Nextville felt his understanding of weapons technology collapse entirely. The humans weren't using predetermined targeting data. They were analyzing a ship during combat and identifying vulnerabilities that even Zephyrian engineers might miss. Their weapons systems were learning Zephyrian technology faster than Zephyrians could adapt to counter them. He activated emergency protocols and began implementing modifications to critical systems that would make them less vulnerable to the human adaptive targeting methods. But as he worked, he realized the futility of the effort. Every modification he made would simply provide the humans with new data to analyze and counter. The human enhancement system wasn't just improving their biological capabilities, it was creating a synergistic relationship between human intelligence and technological systems that transcended the normal limitations of both. They were becoming something that existed in the intersection between biology and technology. Through the communication systems, he could hear human engineering teams coordinating their efforts across multiple vessels. Their technical discussions revealed understanding of principles that should have taken decades to develop, yet they were discovering and implementing these concepts during active combat operations. All stations, this is Chief Martinez on the Yorktown. We're seeing resonance cascade effects in the Zephyrian shield matrices. If we modulate our plasma frequency to match their harmonic nodes, we can create destructive interference patterns that will collapse their entire defensive grid. Copy that, Yorktown. Marathon Engineering confirms the resonance patterns. We're implementing frequency modulation across all weapons systems. This should punch right through their shields. Nextville listened with growing horror as human engineers casually discussed technological principles that represented decades of Zephyrian research and development. They were not only understanding Zephyrian technology, but identifying weaknesses that Zephyrian engineers had never discovered. Computer, estimate the time required for human forces to achieve technological superiority over Zephyrian systems based on current learning rates. Estimation complete. At current learning and adaptation rates, human technological capabilities will exceed Zephyrian equivalents in approximately 47 standard time units. Less than an hour. In less than an hour of combat, the humans would have learned enough about Zephyrian technology to surpass it entirely. They were using the battle itself as an accelerated educational process that was transforming them from a relatively primitive species into something that could match or exceed the technological achievements of a species that had been developing advanced systems for millennia. As his ship's systems continued to fail under increasingly precise human weapons fire, Chief Engineer Nexville realized that the Zephyrian Empire had encountered something unprecedented in the galaxy. They had found a species that used war itself as a form of technological and biological evolution, transforming themselves in real time into whatever was necessary to achieve victory. Admiral Zentkar had commanded the Zephyrian Third Fleet for over 2 decades, presiding over the conquest of 7-star systems and the subjugation of 12 different species. Her tactical expertise had earned recognition throughout the Empire, and her strategic innovations had become standard doctrine in military academies across Zephyrian space. Nothing in her extensive experience had prepared her for the reports streaming from the stellar dominance. The command deck of the dreadnought Imperial Wrath processed information from 17 different sensor arrays as her fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the engagement zone. What she observed challenged every fundamental assumption about warfare that had guided Zephyrian expansion for centuries. Fleet Commander, her tactical coordinator reported, his voice carrying harmonic undertones of barely controlled panic. The engagement has expanded far beyond initial parameters. Human forces now number 43 vessels of unknown classification, and they appear to be using our own fleet as a training exercise. Zentkar's primary sensory organs focused on the holographic display materializing around her command throne. The three-dimensional representation of the battle zone showed patterns that violated basic principles of military engagement. Instead of seeking decisive victory through concentrated force, the human fleet was maintaining prolonged engagement that seemed designed to maximize combat duration. Analysis of Human Tactical Doctrine, Coordinator Velnash. Fleet Commander, human tactics don't match any known military doctrine in our database. They appear to be deliberately escalating the engagement complexity while simultaneously adapting to every countermeasure we employ. It's as if they're using our fleet to test and improve their own capabilities. The implication struck Zentkar with the force of a weapon's discharge. The humans weren't trying to achieve a quick victory. They were using prolonged combat to transform themselves into more effective opponents. Every exchange with Zephyrian forces was making them more dangerous. She accessed the detailed reports from Commander Veltar's vessel, integrating the biological analysis from Dr. Kethera, the tactical observations from Officer Corwin, and the engineering assessment from Chief Nexville. The combined data painted a picture of a species that defied every model of warfare the Zephyrian Empire had developed. Computer, compile comprehensive analysis of human capabilities based on all available data. The holographic display that materialized around her command position was more disturbing than anything she had encountered in her military career. The humans weren't just an enemy force. They were a species that had evolved specifically for warfare. Their biological enhancement systems, cognitive adaptation capabilities, and technological integration reached levels that exceeded anything in the galactic database. Fleet Commander, Dr. Kethera's voice transmitted from the stellar dominance. I must report that human capabilities are continuing to improve throughout the engagement. They're not following any known biological patterns for combat stress. Instead, they appear to be using warfare itself as a form of directed evolution. Zentkar studied the biological data streams with growing alarm. Human performance metrics were climbing steadily as the battle progressed. Their reaction times, cognitive processing speed, technological integration, and tactical innovation were all improving in real time. They were literally becoming more advanced during combat operations. Dr. Kithura, project human capabilities if the current enhancement rate continues for an extended engagement period. Fleet Commander, the projections are unprecedented. If human enhancement capabilities continue at current rates, they will achieve cognitive and technological levels that exceed our own within standard time cycles. They appear to be using combat stress as a catalyst for temporary evolutionary advancement. The communication channel crackled with weapons fire as the battle continued around the stellar dominance. Through the tactical feeds, Zentkar could observe human vessels executing maneuvers that seemed to violate physics while maintaining perfect coordination across dozens of separate ships. Tactical Coordinator implement Pattern Omega engagement protocols. Full fleet deployment with maximum firepower concentration. Implementing Pattern Omega, Fleet Commander. The Zephyrian Third Fleet moved into formation, 17 capital ships arranging themselves in the crushing pattern that had broken enemy resistance in countless previous engagements. The combined firepower they could bring to bear exceeded the total energy output of most planetary defense systems. No force they had encountered could withstand concentrated assault from the full Third Fleet. The human response was immediate and unsettling. Instead of attempting evasive maneuvers or defensive positioning, the 43 human vessels moved to intercept the Zephyrian formation. They weren't retreating from overwhelming force. They were advancing toward it. Fleet Commander, Velnash reported, his voice carrying disbelief. The humans are not attempting to avoid engagement. They're moving to maximize contact with our forces. This contradicts every known survival instinct. Through the sensor arrays, Zentkar watched as the human fleet transformed its configuration to meet the Zephyrian assault. But their formation wasn't designed for defense. It was optimized for prolonged combat engagement. They were positioning themselves to ensure that the battle would continue for maximum duration. Computer, analyze human formation patterns. Determine strategic objective. Analysis complete. Human formation maximizes combat exposure time while maintaining tactical flexibility. Strategic objective appears to be prolonged engagement rather than victory achievement. The realization hit Zentkar like a physical impact. The humans didn't want to win quickly. They wanted to fight as long as possible. They were using the Zephyrian fleet as a training ground to push their enhancement capabilities to maximum levels. All vessels, implement maximum firepower protocols. Target human vessels for immediate destruction. The Third Fleet unleashed concentrated weapons fire that had never failed to achieve devastating results. Energy beams capable of vaporizing asteroids, plasma streams hot enough to melt starship hulls, and kinetic projectiles traveling at significant fractions of light speed converged on the human fleet. What happened next challenged Zentkar's understanding of what was possible in space combat. The human vessels didn't just survive the assault. They seemed to absorb the tactical information and adapt their defensive systems in real time. Ships that should have been destroyed continued fighting with improved capabilities. Crews that should have been overwhelmed by the intensity of combat began operating at even higher efficiency levels. Fleet Commander, Chief Engineer Nexville, transmitted from the Stellar Dominance. The humans are using our weapons fire to analyze our technology. Each attack we make gives them more information to exploit our weaknesses. We're essentially teaching them how to defeat us. The human fleet began implementing tactical maneuvers that no computer simulation had ever predicted as viable. They were coordinating complex attack patterns across dozens of vessels while simultaneously adapting to Zephyrian countermeasures. The level of tactical sophistication being demonstrated exceeded the capabilities of species with thousands of years of military development. Computer, calculate probable human technological and tactical capabilities at conclusion of extended engagement. The projection that materialized made Zentkar's command programming activate emergency protocols. If the battle continued, the humans would eventually achieve technological and tactical superiority over the entire Zephyrian fleet. They were using warfare itself to evolve beyond the capabilities of their opponents. Through the communication systems, she could hear Captain Mitchell coordinating the human fleet operations. His voice carried the same calm authority she had noted in the initial reports, but now she understood that the calm was misleading. The human wasn't relaxed. He was operating in a state of perfect integration between biological enhancement and technological systems. All human vessels, this is Marathon. The Zephyrians have brought their main fleet to the party. Time to show them what happens when humans stop playing games and start playing for keeps. The casual confidence in his voice was disturbing, but what followed was worse. The entire human fleet began implementing coordinated maneuvers that demonstrated tactical capabilities beyond anything in the Zephyrian military database. They were operating as a single integrated entity while maintaining individual vessel autonomy. Fleet Commander, Tactical Officer Corwin, reported from his besieged vessel. Human tactical coordination has achieved perfect synthesis. They're operating as individual vessels and a unified fleet simultaneously. This level of coordination shouldn't be possible for biological crews. Zendkar accessed the neural pattern analysis from Dr. Kithera's biological studies. The human crews weren't just enhanced. They had achieved a form of temporary collective consciousness that allowed perfect coordination without sacrificing individual initiative. They were becoming something unprecedented in galactic warfare. Computer, estimate Zephyrian Fleet's survival probability if current engagement parameters continue. Survival probability decreases exponentially with engagement duration. At current human improvement rates, Zephyrian Fleet's survival approaches zero probability within extended combat timeline. The tactical display updated to show the arrival of additional human forces. These weren't the military vessels that had been joining the engagement throughout the battle. These were massive constructions that dwarfed even the largest Zephyrian dreadnoughts, their energy signatures indicating capabilities that exceeded anything in known space. But most disturbing of all was what the sensors revealed about the human crews aboard these massive vessels. The biological enhancement systems that had been transforming individual humans into superior combatants had reached new levels of integration. The crews weren't just enhanced. They had become something that transcended the normal boundaries between biological consciousness and technological capability. Fleet Commander, Dr. Kithera transmitted, her voice carrying harmonics of genuine awe and terror. The humans aboard those massive vessels aren't operating as individuals anymore. They've achieved a form of collective enhancement that allows them to function as components of their technology. They become living weapons systems. As Zendkar watched the massive human vessels begin deploying weapon systems that operated with precision beyond anything she had witnessed, she realized the horrible truth about the species the Zephyrian Empire had encountered. Humans weren't just another species that could be conquered through superior force and technology. They were a form of life that had evolved to use warfare itself as a catalyst for rapid evolutionary advancement. Every battle they fought made them more dangerous. Every conflict pushed them closer to transcendence. The Zephyrian Empire, with all its technological superiority and military expertise, had made the catastrophic error of engaging a species that became more advanced through combat itself. They had found a species that was designed by evolution to win any war, no matter the odds. And, as the human fleet began its final assault, Zendkar understood that the Zephyrian Empire's age of conquest was ending. They had encountered the one thing their military doctrine couldn't overcome. They had found humanity in its true element, unlimited by peace, unrestricted by mercy, and enhanced by the very act of warfare into something that transcended the boundaries between biology and technology. The battle hadn't ended when the humans appeared to surrender. The war was just beginning.